Let me ask you a question. Who loves going to the beach in summer? Yeah, resounding yes. I love it. I love going to the beach in summer, and I'm actually a winter person, so that proves how much I love the beach. Nick and I went on a beach holiday this summer. We went to a place called Moana Beach. You probably haven't heard of it because we waited too long to book our holiday. And we got one of the last caravan park spots in the state. But it was great. And it was a beautiful beach. If you haven't been there before, it was lovely. But somehow our holiday fell on the cold week after Christmas. And if you remember, it was like really nice weather for Christmas, New Year's, and the first week of January, rubbish. Disappoint. And then we got home and the sun came out again. Devastating. This is just my counselling session about it with you guys because I'm still burnt by it. But anyway, it wasn't super warm. We were determined that we were going to swim. So we picked the one day where the sun was peeking out. And, I'm getting zoomed in and out on, hey guys. Where the sun was peeking out and it was a ripe 23 degrees. And off we went to the beach. We were like, this is the day that we're going to swim because it was the best weather that we were going to get. And so off we went. And I don't know about you, if you've ever walked into the water at the beach when it's a bit too cold and you just sort of edge in, you're like, this is not it. But if I go a bit further, it'll be all right. And so we kept going a bit further. Every time the surface of the water splashed up on us, I was like, it's really cold. But the parts of us that were in the water, they were all right because they were adjusting. And so we kept inching in. And then we kind of looked at each other and we're like, we're just going to have to dive in. Have you ever gotten to that point where you're like, it sucks to get every wave hitting you and making you cold again? And you realize you just got to go all in, head first, get completely immersed. We had a little bit of argument about who was going to be brave enough to do it first. I went first, thank you very much. And I dive in, and it's like diving into a brain freeze for about the first 5 seconds. But then it was awesome. Once we were fully immersed, we started to relax, we started to enjoy, and all of a sudden it wasn't too cold anymore. The water was refreshing, it was fun, and we were able to keep going deeper and keep swimming and enjoying our time at the beach. Now, I'm telling you this story because I actually think it's a beautiful picture of what it can look like when we decide to be a disciple of Jesus. We are in a series called To Greater Depths, and that series is all about looking at what it means to be a disciple of Jesus. And tonight we're going to explore what it might look like in our lives to follow Jesus fully. If we want to be a disciple, we need to dive in. Because a disciple isn't someone who just follows Jesus around but doesn't change anything about their life, or follows Jesus one day and then not the next day. A disciple is someone who follows Jesus fully. A disciple is someone who's decided that the way that Jesus lives is the best way to live. And so every day they seek to become more and more like him. And while that's happening, they're also committed to helping the people around them become more and more like Jesus. That's what a disciple is. A disciple has decided that the way that Jesus lives is the best way. And actually, Jesus lived in a pretty radical way. He loved the people that other people didn't love. He wasn't a fan of money and accumulating wealth. People wanted him to rule as a powerful king, and he wanted to be a humble servant. Jesus lived a pretty radical life, one that clashes with parts of the culture that you and I find ourselves in today. So that means if we want to be his disciple, if we want to follow him fully and live the way that Jesus did, we have to make a choice. And we have to make some sacrifices. We have to look at the way that we might naturally desire to live and consider, is that how Jesus would do it? It says in the Bible that we actually need to sacrifice our lives to be Jesus' disciples. That's how we follow him fully. Jesus says in Matthew 16, verse 24 to 25, he says to his disciples, if any of you wants to be my follower, you must give up your own way. Take up your cross and follow me. If you try to hang on to your life, you will lose it. But if you give up your life for my sake, you will save it. Jesus says, if we want to be his follower, if we want to be his disciple, we need to give up our own way. We need to take up a cross that represents sacrifice and the death of our old selves, and follow him. And that last sentence is so interesting. Jesus says that if we sacrifice and give up our lives, we actually save them. He says if you try to hang on to your life, you will lose it. But if you give up your life for my sake, you will save it. I don't know about you, but that goes against my logic. Jesus loves flipping ideas on their head. He does this a lot. Because if you think about it, when we hang on to something tightly, it's because we want to keep it. It's because we don't want to lose it. We're being really careful. But Jesus says that if we hang on to our life, we'll lose it. And actually, if we give up our life, and here's the key part, for his sake, it will be saved. Sacrifice, handing our lives over to Jesus, diving in completely is the best option. And what I've discovered is that a life of following Jesus, a life of being his disciple, is a life where giving up can actually mean gaining in ways that maybe we didn't expect. Over the summer holidays, while I was away, God was speaking to me about what it looked like to live like Jesus did and live more like Jesus did. And something that Jesus did heaps in the Bible was retreat into quiet places and rest and pray in the presence of God the Father. So I had this sense that the Holy Spirit was kind of telling me that I needed to dive in and do that in my daily rhythms. Now, I'll be honest, this is something I've really struggled with in the past. So when God was stirring that up in me, I was like, all right, I'll give it a go, but like no promises. I'm not very good at this. And I realized that for it to work in my daily rhythms, I would need to get up earlier. Did not enjoy that realization. I realized I was going to have to give up some sleep. Oh, I love sleep. Big fan. So I realized that I actually need to sacrifice some sleep. I would need to give up some physical rest. And I decided it was worth it. I knew that living more like Jesus was the best thing to do. So as I began spending time each morning, and that would look like a range of things. It would look like sitting, just thinking, reflecting, maybe journaling about where I'm at emotionally, what's happening in my life, mentally, spiritually, or reading through God's word at my own pace. Whatever it was just intentionally laying down a part of my day so I could spend solo, uninterrupted time in the presence of the Lord. And as I began to do this, I started to feel really refreshed, energized, revitalized. I felt rested. And this was the really cool surprise. Even though I gave up physical rest, you would think logically I'd be more tired. I was actually experiencing a new type of rest, a rest for my soul. As I live a life that looks more like Jesus, I'm experiencing rest in him. I'm experiencing peace and joy and strength. A life with Jesus is one where giving up can actually mean gaining something that we don't expect. So if we want to be a disciple, we need to dive in. We need to dive in completely. So let me ask you tonight, where are you at? Are you holding back a little bit? Are you kind of edging in halfway? Not quite sure. Where are you holding back? Are you following Jesus half-heartedly? Maybe you only follow Jesus in some spaces of your life and not others. Do you find yourself saying yes to Jesus' teachings for some things and not others? Will you choose to dive in and follow Jesus fully? Now, diving in actually isn't all that it takes to follow Jesus fully. There's more to discipleship than that choice we need to make to lay down our lives. We then need to learn Jesus' way of life. Because after we dive in, we need to learn how to swim, right? And this is a process. It's a beautiful invitation to become Jesus' apprentice. An invitation for him to teach us how to live life his way. We're not going to know what to do straight away, or even a few years down the track. We will always be learning. The New Testament is written in Greek, and the Greek word for discipleship is mathetes, which also means learner. A disciple is a learner. So being a disciple of Jesus is all about learning how to be more like Jesus. And we can't do this on our own. We can fall into a trap of thinking that following Jesus fully has to be about putting in all this strain and all this effort to get to an end goal. Because, quite frankly, that's how we learn to do things in our life and world, right? If you want to learn a new skill, you put heaps of effort in, you do heaps of research, and you strive, and then you get to an end goal and you celebrate. We put this burden on ourselves to be the best disciple we can be, when actually Jesus says this in Matthew 11, 28 to 30, and I'm going to read the Message version. He says, "Are you tired, worn out, burned out on religion? Come to me. Get away with me and you'll recover your life. I'll show you how to take a real rest. Walk with me and work with me. Watch how I do it. Learn the unforced rhythms of grace. I won't lay anything heavy or ill-fitting on you. Keep company with me and you'll learn to live freely and lightly." What a beautiful invitation from Jesus into this process of learning. Learning is a process. Walking with him, watching how he lives, learning his unforced rhythms of grace, learning to live freely and lightly. Like, that sounds incredible. Who here wants to learn how to live freely and lightly? Yeah, sign me up. Have you become burdened? Have you become burdened trying to reach this list of criteria and be the best disciple you can be? Have you been straining and striving and experiencing burden? Being a disciple, it takes choices, it takes action, it takes self-discipline, but Jesus did not live a life of strained effort and burden. He lived a life of surrender. It's different. Are you trying to disciple yourself? Rather than kneeling before Jesus and saying, "Teacher, show me how to live." A disciple chooses to follow Jesus because they've decided that his way of life is the best way. And his way of life will take time to learn. Because being a disciple, it is literally being a learner. It's learning from Jesus and imitating him. And this is a process. None of us will arrive one day. It's not like graduating from school. We are constantly learning and being transformed as disciples. We are learning to live our lives like Jesus did. A disciple is someone who is ready and willing to go deeper. And to go deeper, we need to dive in and we need to learn how to swim. We need to do both. Diving in and learning go together. If we dive in, but then we're not ready to learn how to swim or even willing, then we're not going to go anywhere. We can't keep going deeper. We just kind of stop where we landed when we dived in the first place. But then on the other hand, if we're trying to learn how to swim without being willing to dive in and maybe break through some of that initial discomfort and sacrifice, it's going to be pretty difficult. Like, my husband was the one who was a swimming teacher, not me, but I'm pretty sure it's quite hard to learn how to swim in shallow water. We need to let our feet come off the ground. And while it might feel like we're losing our safety and our comfort, actually going deeper and learning how to swim, learning how to be like Jesus is what will save our life. Jesus said, if you try to hang on to your life, you will lose it. But if you give up your life for my sake, you will save it. So, are you ready to go to greater depths? Are you ready to dive in? And are you willing to keep learning how to swim? Go with me for a moment. I want you to close your eyes. And I want you to imagine that you're at the beach. I want you to imagine that you're living out my Moana Beach experience. That you're at the beach and you've left your stuff on the sand and you've edged up to the water and you're super excited and you put your toes in and you realize it's really cold. You maybe go in a little bit more. Maybe you get waist high. But every time the surface of that water touches you, it feels really cold. You just keep inching in bit by bit. You're really uncomfortable. On the surface, there is discomfort. And then you choose, head first, to dive in, be fully immersed. On the surface, there is discomfort, but once we go deep, once we dive in, once we are immersed, we are refreshed. There is refreshment for our souls. You've moved past that discomfort, and now you're feeling refreshed. You're feeling invigorated, and you're so thrilled because diving in was the way to go. And then you start to swim. You start to move deeper and deeper. As we go deeper in our faith, we are learning how to live our lives the way that Jesus did, living with purpose, with intention, with sacrifice, but without burden. We are living and experiencing rhythms of unforced grace, living a life that is free and light. You can open your eyes. When we're willing to go deep, we will find the best way to live. With Jesus, we will experience true comfort. Because don't get me wrong, we're still going to face challenges. The waves will still crash on us. It's still going to happen. But with Jesus, we will experience comfort as we face those challenges. We'll experience peace when life is chaotic. We'll experience joy when we're heartbroken. We will experience hope when it seems like everything is hopeless. When we give up our life for Jesus' sake, we will find it. When we lay down our life to follow Jesus, we will learn to live freely and lightly. A disciple is someone who has decided that the way that Jesus lives is the best way to live. And so every day they seek to become more and more like him. And while that's happening, they're also committed to helping the people around them become more like Jesus. A disciple is someone who follows Jesus fully. A disciple is someone who is ready and willing to go deeper. And to go deeper, we need to dive in and we need to learn how to swim. I want to invite us to respond. I'd love the band to come up and join us. I just want to pray for two groups of people tonight. And so wherever you are, I invite you to close your eyes. And if this is you, I'd love you to raise your hand. Are you hesitating? If you're really honest with yourself, are you holding back? Maybe you're just following Jesus half-heartedly. Maybe you're only following Jesus in some spaces of your life and not others. Maybe you're saying yes to Jesus' teaching for some things and not for others, but you want to dive in. You don't want to sit in that waist-high water anymore. You want the courage to dive in fully, follow him fully. If that's you tonight, I want to invite you to raise your hand because I've got my eyes open and I want to pray for you now. Awesome. Thank you. Awesome. Yeah, so good. It's not too